So, hi guys, Tim and Toby back for another How Germany Lost the War episode. This is going to be episode 7, and this one is about the Battle of the Ardennes, or more famously known as the Battle of the Bulge. Well, it really depends which, if you're in the Ardennes itself or if you're in Europe, it depends on where you're gone. But yeah, so the Battle of the Bulge is a very famous last attempt that Adolf Hitler and the German Reich made of counter-attacking the American and British troops at the Ardennes in Belgium, the Ardennes Forest, to basically make it a last-ditched attempt to do something about Germany losing the war. Kind of what is known as the gamble in the West, last gamble, as it's called. So it rained on from 16th of December 1944 to the 25th of January 1945, and what basically the plan was as the Allies were advancing up quite steadily towards towards Belgium, the Germans would suddenly then massive counterattack, smashing through a brick wall, running as fast as they can to get to Antwerp, and that caused that big surge, massive counterattack formed a big bulge in the line. So you got the Americans there, the British there, all coming that way, the Germans flooding right in, and then a massive bulge was made in, which caused a lot of destruction. But then it's kind of like when you run a big 100 meters sprint and you start off the blocks as fast as you can. By the middle of it, you've basically lost all your energy. That's what it was like. Germany had lost all the energy by the time they've created the bulge. The Americans, very famously the 101st US Airborne Division, very veterans of Normandy and Market Garden, incredibly famous. They were tasked to take the village of Bastogne, which is heavily defended by German 88mm field anti-tank / anti-personnel and / anti-vehicle, anti-aircraft, guns. And of course German snipers in the houses and everything, and then the members of the British 21st Army Group were on the opposite side, going to places like La Rochelle and places like that. Now, by this point, Germany had basically run out of steam, which we'll tell you later on when it gets to about January, or late December, early January of the next year to come. In 1945, they were basically just losing it completely. So the reason why Germany wanted to get to Antwerp as fast as they can, because Antwerp was a port, and when, like the British Army had done for many years, colonising places, when you take a port, that means you take the rest of the sea. You own the sea. That means you can bring in trade, bring in ammunition, more men, everything. That's why Germany wanted to race to Antwerp, because of the vital equipment and supplies which could be brought in, and basically controlled the whole hub. Which, of course, they tried to, but they created a bulge, and the bulge stopped at one end, at the far end. So of course they couldn't really get there, and so the German army, what they did was basically hold their ground on fighting the Americans, who are steadily coming up that way, and the others, the British, who are slowly coming up that way, kind of going inwards like a triangle. Then there was a plan later on for the Americans to cut around and cut off and encircle the Germans around the area, but that was later on. The Germans didn't actually have any. Well, the Americans, of course, at the battle there was loads of cloud cover, so there was no enemy or allied aircrafts dropping in supplies or firing down on the Germans or etc. There was nothing of that. That's why the Germans couldn't send in any supplies by air or anything by air, because of there's no basically there was cloud cover. No enemy or allied aircraft could drop anything because they couldn't see. Nobody could see up at the sky. Nobody could see down through the clouds, because it was just completely white sheet of clouds. Plus, by December, the cold had kicked in for the Americans, and of course by the Germans. Everybody at Bastogne, at the Ardennes, it was about good minus 20-25 degrees. So you think about over here, where it's -1 and we feel it, but over there, back in 1944-45, it was -20, so that's bad enough. So I'll pass you on to Toby to give another description of the Battle of the Bulge. So, Toby?
Okay, thank you, Tim. Very
Right.
well summarised. So, the battle started basically. So in our last video, we talked about how the Germans stopped the Americans in the Hurtgen forest, allowing them to secure their build-up areas. This became pretty vital to the Germans, as one plane flying over and seeing what they were doing would basically destroy the entire operation, and it would be impossible. So they concealed all of their vehicles, their tanks, their men in the forests of Belgium and Germany. This allowed them to stay very well hidden. You know, they hid their vehicles in barns and stuff, very interestingly. And as a result of that, the Americans did not have a clue what was going on. This was made worse by the fact the American units were made up of newer troops, or at least most part, and when they heard the noises of vehicles moving, they actually thought it was just one Volksgrenadier division moving sectors and then another one taking its place, when in reality it was a huge concentration of, you know, Waffen-SS Panzer divisions, regular Panzer divisions, Falchion Jagers regiments, everything. So the operation then kicked off with a thunderous artillery barrage, probably the largest German artillery barrage on the Western Front in the late war period, which destroyed communications, severely compromised the ability to move. You know, the Americans were still asleep and they rushed kind of out of the houses where they were sitting, because they were sleeping in houses they didn't really expect anything and had to go to their foxholes, and all of them were cut down by artillery fire. Then you have Operation Grief, which was an ultimate failure, but it's very interesting nonetheless. German troops disguised in American uniforms actually decided to infiltrate the American lines. Now, you know, these people had actually been drawn a lot of the time from the Navy, believe it or not, despite it being technically a unit led by the Waffen-SS. Why? Oh, it's actually known as Panzer Brigade 150, if you want to learn more about it. And the reason is a lot of the Navy sailors knew better English than, say, the Waffen-SS, so they just recruited people from the Navy. There was then a really strong training camp, and they were taught, you know, down to how the Americans held their cigarettes. That was one of the things a few people remembered from the training camp. However, just to round off this, most of the people were captured or killed, and if they were captured, they would then be shot as spies. So overall, the operation was a really expensive waste of men and material, and most of the time they weren't even anywhere near the front of the German columns. They were actually in the middle and the back, because they were stuck on the roads. This is where the plan really began to go wrong for the Germans, because the roads, despite being prescribed by Adolf Hitler himself, actually could not take the German Panther tanks, Kubelwagens, or basically anything. And as a result, those routes were abandoned, but that led to a dangerous loss of time. And that's what the Battle of the Ardennes was, really. A battle for time. You know, if the Allies could get in enough reinforcements quick enough, the entire plan would be a dead duck. Having done that kind of special forces operation, the Germans then decided to launch Falchion Jagers. Now, not many people have actually heard of this, because, for whatever reason, but the Germans actually used the Falchion Jagers as Falchion Jagers, or at least some of them, during the Battle of the Ardennes. They dropped them behind the American lines, and it actually caused Eisenhower to become a prisoner of his own troops, because they thought that Germans were actually going to come and assassinate him, when in reality they were over 100 kilometers to the, I think it was north, maybe I could be wrong, but, yeah, this again was bungled horribly, because the Falchion Jagers were led by Heidit, who was a veteran of Falchion Jager Regiment 6, had been in Crete, Normandy, really everywhere with the Falchion Jagers. And this veteran asked the SS, one of the SS leaders of the 6th Panzer Army, or 6th SS Panzer Army as it should be known, you know, what shall we do, blah blah blah, shall we take carrier pigeons? And he just laughed, he literally laughed. Then the Falchion Jager leader was had disinformation on the wind speed, so Falchion Jagers can only jump at a certain wind speed because they're lower than the Allies because their parachute design was pants. And as a result of this, the SS then lied to the Falchion Jagers, saying it was much below, but in reality they were reporting wind speeds of up to 100 kilometers. No, not 100. That's ridiculous. That would be